New Year's Eve should have been the night I finally felt free again. The night I stepped into a new year with hope and light, but instead it became the moment everything inside me collapsed. I still remember the feeling of standing outside that crowded Boston rooftop party, freezing as the wind cut through my dress, my makeup smudged from tears, and my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my coat closed. The rooftop lights sparkled behind me, but I felt like the whole world had gone dark. People were still cheering inside, counting down the final seconds, while I stood alone in the cold, humiliated in a way I had never experienced before. My ex Daniel had just exposed my private text messages to the entire guest list. Messages he twisted, messages he screenshotted out of context, messages he read out loud like a cruel performance meant to make everyone laugh at me. And worst of all, he did it on purpose, right at the moment when the clock hit midnight and everyone was watching. My name is Olivia. I'm a 29-year-old marketing coordinator living in Boston, and I spent the last 3 years of my life loving a man who knew exactly how to break me. I didn't realize it then, but that night would become the beginning of everything. My downfall, my awakening, and eventually my revenge. But in that moment all I felt was pain. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was the deep, heavy hurt that settles into your bones when someone you trusted uses your vulnerability as entertainment for strangers. Daniel had always been charming, always the center of attention, always the guy people liked immediately. He walked into a room and everyone smiled. I used to smile too because I thought loving someone like that meant I had finally found stability. But I didn't see what was hiding under that charm. The manipulation, the control, the small digs at my confidence, the subtle ways he shaped my life to fit his comfort instead of mine. For the last year he controlled everything. Who I talked to, what I wore when I came home from work, even the tone of my voice. If I laughed too loudly, he told me I was embarrassing. If I dressed too nicely, he accused me of wanting attention. If I stayed late at work, he said I was choosing my job over our relationship. I lost friends. I stopped going out. I even stopped wearing bright colors because he said they made me look childish. I didn't realize how much of myself I had given up until the night he destroyed what was left. The rooftop party was supposed to be our new beginning. That's what he told me when he bought the tickets. Let's start the year right, Olivia. Let's show everyone we're strong. I believed him like a fool. I curled my hair, bought a new dress, and even wore the bracelet he got me for our first anniversary, even though I never liked it because he picked it without asking what I liked. I walked into that rooftop party with hope in my chest, hoping he meant what he said. But Daniel never made promises to keep them. He made promises to control the narrative. Inside the party I noticed things immediately. He disappeared every 10 minutes, kept whispering to people, kept checking his phone, kept giving me this strange smile like he knew something I didn't. I should have listened to the little voice in my stomach, the one that whispered something was wrong. But I pushed it down because I was tired of feeling paranoid. I just wanted one good night. One peaceful night. One night to breathe. But Daniel didn't want peace. He wanted a stage. 5 minutes before midnight, he grabbed the microphone from the DJ, something only Daniel would have the nerve to do, and started making a little speech. He talked about truth, loyalty, and relationships built on honesty. People were confused, but they listened. I thought he was going to propose for a second, and my heart dropped into my stomach. But then he said my name loudly, clearly, with a tone that made my chest tighten. He pulled out his phone, held it up, and started reading my private messages out loud. Messages to my best friend where I said I felt lonely. Messages where I admitted I didn't trust him sometimes. Messages where I said I was tired of him disappearing without telling me. He twisted every word. He read my most vulnerable thoughts like they were jokes. The crowd laughed. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others whispered. One girl even clapped. I felt myself shrinking inside, breaking apart piece by piece. When I tried to stop him, he pushed my hand away and said, "If you have nothing to hide, why are you embarrassed?" But the embarrassment wasn't the punch that destroyed me. It was the reason I later discovered why he did it. Because standing behind him that night, near the bar, was a woman wearing a red dress. A woman I recognized from his phone months ago. A woman he told me was just a colleague. I saw the way she looked at him. I saw the guilt flicker across her face when our eyes met. I saw everything. My messages weren't exposed because he wanted honesty. They were exposed because he wanted a distraction. His mistress had shown up at the same party. She wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to walk straight into the life he was pretending was perfect. So he used me as a shield, a spectacle, a public humiliation to make sure no one would look at him long enough to see the truth. He took my privacy, my dignity, my trust, and turned it into his personal smokescreen. And the worst part was that people bought it. They believed his story. They always did. Because he had the charming smile, the easy confidence, the wealthy family background, and the connections. I had none of that. I had only myself, and even that felt shattered. So when the countdown hit 0, and everyone shouted, "Happy New Year," I slipped out through the back door, holding my coat tightly around my body. The snow was falling hard, covering the streets, sticking to my hair, freezing my fingers, but I kept walking. I walked past people cheering, couples kissing, fireworks exploding in the sky. My legs felt heavy, my chest hurt, and my breath came out in short clouds. Every step away from that rooftop felt like walking away from the version of me that had been too afraid to see the truth. I walked all the way home, the cold sinking so deep it felt like I would never be warm again. And somewhere in the middle of that lonely walk, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger yet. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. A slow, quiet awareness that Daniel had crossed a line so deep that I could never go back. I didn't cry when I got home. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I sat on my couch in the dark, watching the snow fall outside my window, and made myself one promise. A promise whispered slowly, softly, but with more strength than anything I had ever said in my life. Next year, if Daniel ever tries to step on my life again, I would make sure he never got the chance. The months after that awful New Year's Eve became the quietest, strangest, and strongest months of my entire life. Almost like I had been forced into a cocoon I didn't choose, but somehow needed. At first, everything inside me felt numb. Like my body was functioning but my spirit had gone somewhere else to recover. I didn't tell anyone what happened for a while. I didn't post anything online. I didn't text my friends back immediately. Instead, I focused on myself in a way I never had before. Every morning I woke up early, made the same simple breakfast, took long walks through my neighborhood, and tried to rebuild the pieces of myself Daniel had slowly chipped away. I went back to the hobbies he used to laugh at, reading, sketching, even painting my nails bright colors because he always said it made me look childish. Slowly, painfully, I made a life that didn't revolve around him. And as I grew stronger internally, the anger began to form. Not loud anger, not explosive anger, but the calm, cold kind that grows from clarity. I started seeing things clearly. How he controlled me, how he isolated me, how he used his charm like a weapon. And I saw something else too, how desperately he needed his image. Daniel didn't care about love, or loyalty, or honesty. He cared about reputation. He cared about being admired. He cared about his fancy tech startup, his shiny investor dinners, his curated online presence, the way people gasped when he talked about innovation. His entire life was a performance. And I realized something important. People like him aren't afraid of losing love. They are afraid of losing control and losing the image they built for themselves. So while I healed quietly, I also started to think. Not about revenge at first, but about truth. About how someone like Daniel should not be allowed to go through life harming people and walking away untouched. And somewhere in that quiet thinking, my plan began. It wasn't sudden. It didn't come from rage. It came from a slow understanding of who he was and what he valued. And I realized that if I ever wanted to protect myself or anyone else from him, I needed to know everything. I needed to understand his world, his business, his secrets. So I started paying attention. I followed his company updates online. I read articles about his investors. I checked public records, business filings, and even tech reviews that mentioned his startup. At first it felt strange, like I was spying. But the more I learned, the more I realized something was wrong. Numbers didn't add up. Promises and interviews didn't match the documents on file. His so-called partnerships had no proof anywhere. And that's when I started talking to people quietly. Not his friends, those people would never help me. But the people he overlooked. The barista snapped every morning. The event photographer who once worked for his tech conference. The former intern who quit after 2 months because she felt uncomfortable. Daniel never paid attention to people he didn't consider useful. But I did. And they remembered everything. Little by little, a picture started to form. One person mentioned that Daniel bragged about extra funding that didn't actually show up in the company reports. Another said he once saw Daniel editing a contract on his laptop while loudly insisting it was a signed deal. And then the former intern told me something that made every hair on my arm stand up. She said Daniel used client data for personal projects and once bragged about repurposing sensitive information to impress someone important. That was when I knew this wasn't just emotional manipulation. He was doing illegal things. Things that could ruin lives, not just hearts. And suddenly, I understood why he worked so hard to maintain his image. His entire business stood on lies. Carefully crafted, beautifully packaged lies. I didn't rush. I didn't act impulsively. I moved quietly, slowly, like someone walking across thin ice. I gathered details in small pieces, saving everything in a private folder on a USB drive that never left my apartment. I kept screenshots of old messages where he talked about moving money around. I saved photos of his laptop screen that I took months before, moments when he didn't notice me standing behind him. I copied public documents, dug into investor blogs, read legal guidelines about data protection, and even researched whistleblower policies, just to understand what counted as evidence. I was building something without fully knowing what it would become, but I knew it needed to be complete. Every night I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, notebook beside me, connecting things like a detective solving a case no one else knew existed. I learned the names of clients he scammed, the products he overpromised, reports he falsified, and debts he hid. Some nights I felt sick reading everything. Some nights I wanted to cry. But I didn't stop. Because with every new detail I felt something shift inside me. A sense of power that I had not felt in years. The fear I used to feel around him faded. The insecurity disappeared. The voice in my head that once said, "You're too weak," grew quiet. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger. The strangest part was how easy it was. Daniel trusted completely in his own charm. He believed that because he humiliated me, I must still be broken, still harmless, still too weak to look him in the eyes. He thought I was irrelevant now. He blocked me online, but he didn't block his friends, and he didn't block the public information I already had access to. He forgot something important. Humiliation doesn't destroy a person if that person decides to rebuild themselves. It sharpens them, focuses them, teaches them who they really are. While he was partying in Miami, going on weekend trips, posting entrepreneur life stories online, I was slowly piecing together what would eventually become his downfall. But at that time I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about justice, and safety, and closure. 3 months after New Year's, I finally had something solid. A timeline. A list of forged documents. Screenshots of misleading invoices. Contacts of people who never got paid. A pattern of behavior that would send any investigator into a frenzy. I stared at my laptop late one night, the glow of the screen lighting up my small apartment, and realized I had something powerful. Too powerful to act on emotionally. So I made myself a rule. I would not move until I was fully healed. Not until I was steady. Not until I could look at his name without shaking. Because if I acted from pain, I would make mistakes. If I acted from weakness, he would escape. But if I acted from strength, he would never see the sun the same way again. So I kept healing. I started therapy again. I rebuilt friendships I lost. I joined a gym. I volunteered on weekends. I even repaired my relationship with my sister, who I had grown distant from because Daniel always said she was a bad influence. Slowly, quietly, I built a life that had nothing to do with him. And as my life grew better, my perspective grew clearer. I saw what mattered. Peace, happiness, self-worth. And I saw what he threatened. Not just my emotional well-being, but the emotional and financial safety of others. That was when I made my final decision. Revenge wasn't about hurting him. Revenge was about stopping him and protecting myself forever. By the time summer arrived, my plan was nearly complete. Every document organized, every screenshot labeled, every email archived, every timeline verified. I created a full digital file, clean, detailed, undeniable. The kind of evidence that government regulators dream about. I even created 3 backup copies and stored them in different places, because I knew once this started, Daniel would do anything to escape. And the strangest thing was, through all of this, he still had no idea. He thought I was just another ex-girlfriend he had handled. He had no idea the quiet woman he once controlled was now the only person who could take everything away from him. And that was the most empowering truth of all. By fall, my transformation was complete. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. I had gone from a crying girl standing in the snow to a woman with a plan. A woman with evidence. A woman with purpose. And when the next New Year's Eve started approaching, I knew exactly what needed to happen. The storm I had prepared was ready. And he would never see it coming. New Year's Eve came again faster than I expected. And as the date approached, I felt something I never thought I would feel on the anniversary of the worst night of my life: calm. Not excitement, not fear, not nervousness. Just calm, as my mind had finally settled into a place that knew its power, understood its purpose, and no longer trembled at the memory of Daniel's voice or the rooftop where everything fell apart. I woke up that morning with a steady heartbeat, brewed my coffee, sat by the window, and watched snow fall over Boston like the universe was pressing a soft reset button on the world. I didn't feel broken anymore. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt ready. Every detail had been planned weeks in advance. Every file had been checked, backed up, and prepared. Every message had been scheduled. And at midnight exactly, 1 year after the moment Daniel humiliated me, I would send the storm he never saw coming. It wasn't hatred that motivated me now. It was justice. It was closure. It was the quiet truth that some people do not stop hurting others until someone makes them face what they have done. And I had been preparing for this moment for a full year. I knew his plan for the night before he even posted anything online. Daniel wasn't hard to predict. He always followed the same pattern. Show off, impress investors, pretend his business was booming. Hide the cracks under a big smile and an even bigger lie. And just like I expected, he rented the same style of rooftop venue he used last year. Only this time it was bigger, flashier, and filled with industry professionals. He had been promoting the event for weeks on social media, bragging about a major announcement and a huge expansion deal that would change the future of tech. I watched all of it quietly, almost amused. I already knew the truth. The expansion was fake, the deal was fake. The investors didn't even know their money had been rerouted into Daniel's personal accounts. He was building a castle out of smoke, and at midnight the world would finally see it for what it was. I spent the day preparing the timing of everything, double-checking every email, every attachment, every scheduled delivery. There were 3 main groups in my plan. First, the state regulatory office, including the department that handles business fraud, forged documents, illegal data usage, and investor misconduct. Second, every investor Daniel had ever lied to, scammed, or manipulated. I had their contact info from public filings, news articles, and comments he accidentally left visible on a shared document months ago. And third, the clients he stole data from. They deserved to know what he did. I created separate email packets for each group. Organized, clear, detailed, and with every piece of evidence attached. And the final piece of the puzzle was the journalist. A woman from a respected tech publication who had been investigating scam startups with good PR. She had reached out to me after I submitted an anonymous tip months ago. When she realized how much evidence I had, she told me she would publish a full article the moment I said the word. I didn't want the story out too early. It had to hit exactly when it mattered. So she agreed to schedule her article for midnight. The timing wasn't petty, at least not entirely. It was symbolic. It was poetic. It was justice arriving at the same second that humiliation had arrived for me the year before. I dressed simply that night, nothing fancy, just jeans, boots, and a warm coat. I wasn't going to any party. I wasn't hiding either. I simply wanted to watch the city, breathe the cold air, and feel myself alive, free, and strong. At 11:40 p.m., I left my apartment and took a long walk toward downtown, letting the cold wind fill my lungs, letting the snowflakes land on my hair and face. The streets were full of people in sparkly outfits, laughing, holding hands, counting minutes until the new year. I felt strangely separate from them, but also strangely at peace. I wasn't celebrating with noise or confetti. I was celebrating with closure. At 11:57 p.m., I reached the block near the rooftop where Daniel's event was happening. I didn't need to go inside. I didn't need to see him face to face. That chapter of my life was over. But I did want to be nearby, to reclaim the ground where I had once stood shaking and humiliated. The rooftop lights glowed above me, bright and loud, filled with people taking selfies, music spilling into the air, investors mingling with fake enthusiasm. Daniel was probably in the center of it all, smiling with that arrogant confidence he always wore like armor. He had no idea his entire world would collapse in 3 minutes. And for once I didn't feel guilty about it. I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel small. I felt powerful most quietly and peacefully. 11:59 p.m. My phone buzzed gently as the automated system flashed a reminder. Scheduled dispatch in 60 seconds. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I breathed in slowly, closed my eyes for a moment, and whispered to myself, "Let's end this." And then midnight arrived. At exactly 12 a.m., while the city shouted Happy New Year, and fireworks lit up the sky, my emails went out. All of them. Dozens of them. Hundreds of pages of evidence. Screenshots, timelines, bank statements, forged contracts, client data misuse, investor deception. At the same second, the journalist's article was posted online with the headline, "The Tech Fraud Hiding in Plain Sight. Inside Daniel Cole's Web of Lies." Her article spread fast. Faster than I expected. People were sharing it within minutes. Comments, retweets, reactions, questions. Investors' phones began buzzing non-stop. Regulators opened emergency inquiries. A few clients replied instantly, furious. The storm was officially alive. Inside his rooftop party, the shift happened quickly. First, an investor got the email and showed it to another. Then someone checked their phone and saw the article. Then another. And another. I watched from the sidewalk as faces changed at the windows. Confusion, anger, disbelief. People walked away from Daniel. Some confronted him. A few pointed at their phones. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. The chaos was visible. And then the moment that sealed everything. 2 detectives arrived at the building, walked past the security guard, and headed straight for the elevator. It was almost surreal. Last year, Daniel used the spotlight to humiliate me. This year, the spotlight exposed him. He created the stage. I just pulled the curtain. A few minutes later, my phone rang. His name appeared on the screen. The same man who once mocked me for crying was now calling me for help. I didn't answer. I let it ring out, then blocked the number. There was nothing left to say. I walked slowly past the building, the same place where I had stood broken a year ago. But this time I wasn't breaking. I was rebuilding. I was reclaiming the space where I had once felt my smallest, and turning it into the place where I felt my strongest. The air felt lighter. The snow felt softer. The world felt new. I didn't smile in triumph. I didn't celebrate loudly. My victory wasn't about laughing at him. It was about finally feeling whole again. Daniel's life changed permanently that night. His accounts frozen, his investors pulling out, his company under investigation, his reputation destroyed in a single hour. But my life changed too. Not because he fell, but because I rose. Because I learned that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it gathers quietly. Sometimes it comes back exactly 1 year after heartbreak and says, "I survived." As I walked home, fireworks still popping in the sky, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about liberation. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself he tried to crush. And I had done that. Fully. Completely. Without ever needing to see him again. And for the first time in a long time, I stepped into a new year with peace. Not because he was ruined, but because I was finally free.